Thank you. Thank you. I'm super grateful to be here and share with you this morning. As we get started, let me tell you a story. Back years ago when I was in college, let me rewind that. Not that many years ago when I was in college, I started dating a girl. Her name was Juliet. And it was a brand new relationship right at the end of our second year, our sophomore year of college. And we were just excited to be with each other and hang out with each other and all the things. We were two young pups in love kind of thing. And the thing to know about this story, though, is that our relationship started right at the end of our second year, which meant that looking forward to the summer, I would be spending my summer on campus taking some additional classes, and she had just taken a job as a camp counselor at a camp in another state. So that was going to be a real dour. That was going to damper our relationship a little bit because it was, it was brand new, just a lot of excitement, enthusiasm there. And this is back when I was in college, where I think I had an email address, one of those early adopters, but no college students used email at the time. And we definitely didn't have cell phones. At most, a BlackBerry or a pager. But the only people I knew who had pagers were doctors and drug dealers, and I was neither of those, right? So I knew that communicating with her was going to be a real challenge for us that summer. And the weeks went by. I missed her so much, wondering what she was up to, how things were going. And it's a brand new relationship. Until one day, I was surprised to get a letter from her in the mail. I get this letter. It's this card. I go and I rip it open, and I open up the card, and inside it has just one statement: 2 John 1:12. I have no idea what 2 John 1:12 is. So I run over to my bookshelf, I grab a Bible off the shelf, and I open it up to 2 John 1:12, which, by the way, is like this. It's one page in this really thick Bible. It's one chapter. So technically it's just 2 John 12, and here's what it said. I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face so that our joy may be complete. Oh! After a summer of missing her, this is what she wrote to me. Oh man, that was tough. Sorry. Yeah. By the way, that relationship only lasted 3 months, so it didn't really go anywhere, right? Folks, I turned 48 a couple of weeks ago, and for most of that time, church has been a big part of my life. Religion has been a big part of my life. The Bible, I've heard lots of different messages in my life. So I've gotten lots of different notes and letters, the things that include Christian verses or phrases. And for the most part, they're pretty encouraging and inspiring. In fact, there's an entire industry of Christian greeting cards and desk calendars and wall posters. I'm sure some of you have maybe a calendar on your desk with these really beautiful Christian things that remind you that you are not alone, that God has created you for a purpose, to encourage you, to make you feel like with God you can conquer the world. For example, I know that I used to have a poster on my wall. I think it had either eagles or it was on a beach. I forget. But it had this verse on it. It said, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you." Oh, that's beautiful. That's real poetic, right? Maybe you've been to a wedding before where you've heard those words: love is patient, love is kind, love never fails. There's a reason why that's used at all these weddings, right? Because there's a lot from the Bible that can be very uplifting. The Bible has some beautiful things in it. And then on the other hand, I've come across things in the Bible that you're never going to hear at a wedding or see in a greeting card. Can you imagine, for example, it's your anniversary, and you want to get your wife an anniversary card. And so you pick out just the right card, and in it, you write this verb, Proverbs 21:9, and she gets so excited. She runs over to her bookshelf, and what is this all about? Only to find that Proverbs 21:9 is, better to live on a corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Happy anniversary, honey, I love you, you know? I mean, there's some passages in the Bible that are never gonna make it into a greeting card. And then there's some passages that are just very, very tough. There's some passages that are tough to read, tough to figure, how does this work out in my life? And there's a passage I would love for us to explore today. It's one that sort of stuck with me, back of my heart, back of my mind. It's lived there for a little bit, and I don't know what to do with it. And it says this: He must increase, and I must decrease. He must become greater, and I must become less. He must become greater, and I must become less. And the thing is, it's not really the first part, he must increase or he must become greater, that I have tension with. I'm actually great with God getting bigger in my life. I invite that. God, be big in my life. I want more of you. And even if you're not a regular church person, you're sitting here today, or maybe you're watching today. So there's probably a little bit of you that's like, hey, I wouldn't mind having some more God in my life. But that's not the place where we have tension. It's the second part of that statement that's a real doozy. I must decrease. I must become less. It's a real tough thing. Someone else up and me down. Here's why this is such a difficult thing, at least it is for me, maybe for you too. Because culturally, the idea that we need to decrease, or that basically we need to become less, or less me, flies in the face of every message that we hear in our world today. We live in a world where it's all about more me, more you. We live in a world where building your brand is a very real thing. We live in a world where we're trying to figure out, how do I increase myself? How do I increase my name, my notoriety, my reputation? How do I do more me? If you're a small business owner, you know this. Every social media guru knows this. Every politician, every sports team, every entertainer knows it's not about me decreasing, it's about me increasing. We understand the power of building your brand. Get your name out there, folks. Promote yourself, your skills, your service. In order to be successful in this world, it's all about increasing yourself, not less me, but more me. So culturally, the idea that someone else has to increase and I decrease, or someone else becomes greater and I am less, doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's not just a cultural tension, it's a personal tension as well. Because it's unnatural, it's uncomfortable. Because personally, you and me, none of us aspire to be less. None of us aspire to be less than what we could be. We all want to be more. We want to realize our fullest potential. We want to be more greater, more stronger, more richer, greater with our friendships, greater in our relationships, greater with how I manage myself. Friends, I guarantee you, nobody in this room wants to shortchange themselves. You did not wake up this morning saying, hey, I would love to be 50% of my potential. Nobody wants to be less. You know, if I was a betting man, and I am, I bet that if I came to your house and I looked through your bookshelves, I would find a title, or I would, if I flipped through your Audible account, I bet you I would find something that says a book or a title that has the title, Be a Better You, or How to Reach Your Potential, you know, how to maximize your life. You know, there would be some kind of book that says, helps you figure out how to be a better version, a greater version, a more version of yourself. We probably all have that. So culturally, we're pulled to want to be more, not less. And personally, we definitely want to be more, not less. Not decrease, we're trying to increase, right? When I was younger, I watched a lot of television, lot of television in my life. I am the only child of some Korean American parents, first generation Korean American parents. English is not their first language, and it's the three of us. So growing up at night, we didn't play a lot of board games. because back then, most board games were designed for 4 or more people. There's also a little cultural communication barrier there. So we watched a lot of TV as a family. I watched a lot of TV growing up. And back then, if you watched a lot of TV, that also meant you had to sit through all the commercials, right? Anyone else watch a lot of TV growing up? Yeah. And man, there was a golden age of commercials. I mean, there's some stuff that I still remember today. So for example, let's actually try this all together. If I were to say, give me a break, break me off a piece of that. Oh my gosh, we got some television watchers here. Love it. How about this? Every kiss begins with K. Yeah. I was actually putting the message together, and I wrote that down. Every kiss begins with K. And I look at the word kiss, and I was like, wait a minute. The word kiss actually starts with the letter K. Like, that's what that's about. Okay. Oh my gosh. All right, let's go a little old school on this one. See how many of you get this. The best part of waking up is Folgers. Oh gosh, all right. I am not the only television watcher. And then there was one commercial. It's actually this one has stayed with me for a long time. Be all that you can be. Get an edge on life in the. That's right. Those words. Be all that you can be. I think the Army has dropped the song, but the slogan or the motto is still prevalent in their recruiting programs today. Be all that you can be, because this taps into a fundamental human longing, an aspiration that all of us share, that we want to be all that we can be, to be satisfied, to be fulfilled in our life, to reach our potential, to feel complete, to be all that we can be, to be greater than what you are today. Not less, but more. Not less, but greater. Being all that you can be doesn't sound like being more. It sounds like it doesn't sound like being less, it sounds like being more. More in control of your potential, more in control of your future, more in control of what you can be. Be all that you can be more. And yet we come back to this passage. He must increase, I must decrease. He must become greater, and I must become less. How in the world does this make sense when we're trying to reach our fullest potential? We're trying to be more, folks, not less. And how in the world are we supposed to hear these words when we're hoping to be the best versions of ourselves, the healthiest versions of ourselves? So this morning, this is what I'd like to take a look at. I'd like to take a look at this text a little bit more and see, where do these words come from? Who says it? You know, and is this something Jesus says? Does someone else say it? And why is someone trying to tell us to be less, not more? And is there a way that we can actually become all that we can be, but maybe in a way that we would have never imagined or thought of before? So in order to do that, we're going to jump into John chapter 3, verse 22. The Gospel of John chapter 3, verse 22. And it starts with this. After this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them and baptized. So let me provide some context here. At this point, Jesus is early on in his ministry. He has just gotten his team together. Andrew, Simon, Philip, Nathaniel, the rest of the 12. He's got his inner circle together, his launch team, his early adopters. He's assembled them, and they are starting to travel from region to region, teaching people, performing miracles, and baptizing them. I mean, it's very early on. And the thing is, this is actually pretty normal during this time. It's a very normal thing for a religious leader to get their students, their disciples, their followers together and start going around doing their religious things, teaching people, performing miracles, trying to tell people what to do and all this stuff. So Jesus is not the only one doing this. There are a whole slew of religious leaders, rabbis, teachers in the area that are going from place to place, teaching, performing miracles, baptizing. There's a whole bunch of people. Jesus is doing it. There's another guy who's doing it as well. His name's John. Verse 23. Now John was also baptizing at Aenon near Salim because there was plenty of water and people were coming and being baptized. So on the one hand, you've got this new up-and-comer, Jesus of Nazareth, who is starting to gain notoriety and attention, a growing number of followers. And yet on the other hand, you have a guy, John the Baptist, who has a well-established ministry. He's so well known that his nickname is the Baptist. He is John the Baptist. Imagine you would be known as, Carl, the insurance guy, or Sammer, the pastor, or, Debbie, the plumber, or whatever it is, right? That you are so well known for that. And this is John. John the Baptist has a well-established ministry. He is the guy who sets up shop, has a sign out front that says, we've been baptizing you and your family for the last 25, 30 years, and we love it. And everyone in the community knows it, right? And we're still going strong. As opposed to Jesus and his crew, they're fairly new. But John, he's been around for a while. And it's fair to say that both ministries, both shops are actually doing well, attracting people, vibrant ministries. So then what happens? Verse 25. An argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. An argument develops. People start talking. Because the baptism business these days is a very big business. There's a lot of people talking about baptism, lots of baptism strategies to discuss. How do you dunk? Should you dunk? Should you sprinkle? What's the actual meaning? What kind of water should you use? You say a prayer? Do you dunk from the rooftops or on the floor? There's a lot to talk about. And during this time, getting ceremonially washed was a big deal. And so when it came to baptisms, John the Baptist had one of the biggest shops in town. If you wanted to talk about baptism, if you wanted to get baptized, you went to John the Baptist. If you had any questions about getting ceremonially washed, John the Baptist was your guy. He was the guy to see. So in the middle of all this conversation that's happening, John's team reports back to him with some pretty alarming news. They came to him, John's disciples came to him and said to him, Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing. And guess what, John? Everyone is going to him. There is a concern that John's ministry is getting surpassed by Jesus' ministry. The two ministries have set up shop right next to each other. Jesus' shop, John's shop. And guess what? Now, Jesus is getting all the likes. People are going to him. Everyone's double tapping on his Instagram account. In our world, it's all about liking and subscribing. So everyone is going and following Jesus. They're liking his channel. They're following his account. Have you heard about this new guy, Jesus? He's got some good stuff. He's some really great teaching, incredible miracles. Let's go to him. Let's see what he's doing. Let's go and follow him. So John's disciples, they're really concerned about this. The changing tide, the shift in momentum in the baptism world. You say, hey, John, your star is fading. John, you're losing your influence. John, people are going elsewhere to get baptized. John, you are not becoming all that you can be. John, what do you have to say about that? Verse 27. To this, John replied, a person can only receive what is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but am sent ahead of him. In other words, John says, I know who I am, guys. And I know what I am. I know who I am not. And I know what I am not. And I am confident in the person that God has created me to be. And John gives this master class on self-awareness. I'm not going to go overboard trying to be someone that I'm not. I'm not going to get caught into a comparison trap. I know my assignment. I know my journey. I know my lane. I'm not surprised or concerned that Jesus is getting more influence these days, and neither should you. In fact, I welcome it. John knew his lane. John knew Jesus' lane. John is like, hey, listen, guys, don't calm down a little. I maybe have been the best baptizer in the land, but Jesus has always been the one that I've been trying to point everyone to. I'm succeeding, we're winning. We're all fulfilling everything that we're supposed to be when we point people to Jesus, because he is the one that changes people's lives. And he tries to reassure his disciples, hey, this is how we actually become all that we can be. And in fact, he uses an illustration, an example that I think some of you may be familiar with. If you've been ever asked to be a best man or a maid of honor or be in someone's bridal party, this may sound familiar. John gives an example. Guys, listen. The bride belongs to the bridegroom, but the friend who attends to the bridegroom, the groom, the best man, waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine. It's now complete. John makes it clear that when it comes to his life's work and mission, it's always been to see people get connected to Jesus, to get people to understand that a relationship with Jesus is what fulfills life, to see people understand that there is a God that loves them and has the best for them, and he has given his life so they can experience a fullness of life. As a pastor, I get a chance to officiate weddings. Do about, 7, 8 weddings a year. I may have even officiated some of your weddings, and I love it. I love celebrating with families and friends. But I've also seen my share of good weddings and bad weddings, okay? And I will tell you, a good wedding is a wedding that is defined by people who know where to be and what to do. People who understand their responsibility. Best man, you stand here. Bride, you stand here. Maid of honor, you stand here. Parents, you stay there, kind of thing, right? Bad weddings are weddings when people don't remember where you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to do or what your responsibility is. Yo, man, hey, guys, just stand there. Bridesmaids, this is not about you, okay? Wedding coordinator, hey, calm down. Parents, this is definitely not about you. This is about the couple here, right? Weddings work great when people understand their role and who the wedding is all about. And that's John's mission. John's mission has always been to see the bride and the bridegroom come together. And his role in that was always to be a best man. And once they were together, his joy would be complete. His joy would be complete. As opposed to his disciples. His disciples are fuming. His disciples are they can't understand it. They can't believe how calm and how happy John is at this moment. John, things are not turning out the way what are you going to do? We've been churning our wheels. We've been working so hard in this baptism thing. We've been putting so much energy and attention, doing everything we can to move forward in life, doing everything we can to be the best that we can be. What do you have to say to that, John? That's where John says this. He must become greater, and I must become less. He must become greater, and I must become less. That's a tough thing to hear. That's a tough thing to live out. So what do we do with that? How does this actually work out in our life? Well, let me try to see if I can explain this or sort of unpack this for you. But in order to do that, I have to do one thing. I have to introduce you to a very important person in this room, maybe the most important person in this room today. And his name is Bobby. And he is the audio engineer, or what we call the sound guy. And it's that guy right there. Would you all turn and say hi to Bobby? Hi, Bobby. Woo! Yeah, show him some love. Yeah, Bobby. You see, on Sunday mornings, Bobby sits in front of this master control, right? He's got all these buttons and dials all over. And his main job this morning is to make sure that all the music that you hear, all the microphones, all the things that you hear, the things that are coming out of my mouth even, that his main job is to make sure all of that sounds great. And so he's busy turning dials up, turning dials down, finding just the right settings to make sure that it all sounds great, so that the band and that the music sound the best that they can be, so that as I'm preaching, so that I can sound the best that I can be. And if those dials that he's moving around are not set to the right place, then you'll hear feedback. It'll start to sound screechy, and all of us will be like, what's going on here, you know? But when he has found the right settings for it all, something beautiful happens in this room. And you see on Sunday mornings, there are dials on that board that Bobby sets and tweaks and turns up and down. But Monday through Saturday, you and I, we have a board, an internal board, a life board, a heart board, where we start to set our dials. Let me be real specific here. All of us have this board that helps operate our lives. So for example, you might have a board and a section is called diet or food. And you have one dial that says fries. And I know all of you, if you're like me, I want to turn that. Fries must increase. Fries must become greater. But right next to it is a dial called vegetables, right? And we know for our life to be the best that it can be, fries must decrease and vegetables must increase. Unless it's after 10 p.m., then it's probably the other way. At least that is for me. There's probably another set of dials. You know, there's probably one dial on that board that says sleep. And you probably know that for you to experience the best life possible, sleep needs to increase. But right next to it is a dial called Netflix, right? And you always wrestle which one increases and which one decreases. Right? There's probably another dial, exercise. We all have this dial, exercise. In order for us to be all that we can be, exercise must become greater. And right next to it is a dial called Netflix, right? Netflix must become less. And that, unless it's after 10 p.m. again, and then somehow it gets weird, right? So we got all these dials in our lives. But up at the top, there's probably a section called Who's in Control. And you'll see two dials there. One dial with the label me, and another dial with the label God. And when it comes to reaching our fullest potential, our natural response is to turn up the me dial. I need to do more. I need to be more. In order to become greater, I need to study more. I need to work more. You know, I just need to be more. In order to become the best version of ourselves, we want to focus on this dial. We have a natural tendency to focus on the me dial. In order to be stronger, smarter, richer, more influential, more productive, more creative, more anything, our natural tendency is to reach for the me dial and crank that thing up. But what the passage shows us, what John the Baptist is telling his disciples is, hey, in order for us to be the best that we can be, we need to stop focusing on the me dial, start focusing on the God dial. Stop focusing on me, actually turn that down, decrease, and the God dial, increase. Start turning this thing up. You know, in life, you may have been churning your wheels trying to get ahead, trying to do everything you can to move forward, to become more or greater at whatever it is that you're working on, you're focusing on. You know, and maybe it's going great, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not sounding great. Maybe your work is not turning how you thought it would be. Maybe that relationship that you're in is not working out. That job isn't working out. The life venture, that project, whatever it is that you've been trying to crank it up, it's not working out. And what you think, okay, it's not, let me focus. I got to turn this up more. I got to do a little bit more of this. You know, Bobby will tell you, you don't get the best sound by cranking up all the dials. Sometimes you get the best sound by turning some dials up. Sometimes you get the best sound by turning some dials down. And what this passage, what John is saying, say, hey, maybe we need to let Jesus actually be in control. Let him do what he's really great at, which is leading and guiding our lives. You know, and start focusing on the me dial. Start focusing on the God dial and turning that up and turning down the me dial. More God, less me. More God, less me. And as I say that, I do want to clarify something for you. I just want to make sure I'm real clear. It's this. One, God does want you to be all that you can be. God does want all of us to be all that we can be. The Bible is very clear about that. He has created us with these unique skills and passions. Every story and chapter in the Bible tells us that he, above all, wants us to step into what and who we are fully made and created to be. So God does want you to be all that you can be. But how do you do that? It's by letting Jesus be all that he can be in our lives. John the Baptist is filled with joy, and he feels complete. He feels like he has fulfilled his life, not by focusing on the me dial, but by turning up the God dial. You know, how does this work out? What does this look like in your life? Because growing in faith actually means turning down the me dial and turning up the God dial. You know, as a father, I've got, you saw a picture of them. I've got 2 girls, Ella and Chloe. They're 9 and 6. Every day I'm trying to figure out, how do we become the best father that I can be? You know, is it by reading more? Is it by going to more parent conferences? Or is it by helping them to see a real life example of a father who loves to engage and play with them so that they can understand that there's a God who loves to engage and be present in their lives, turning down the me dial and turning up the God dial. You know, similarly, I want to be the best husband that I can be. You know, and so every night I walk upstairs after my Netflix and all that stuff, right? Fries and Netflix. I walk upstairs to the bedroom, you know, after I've finished watching something or finished doing some work, and I walk up the stairs to the bedroom and step in only to hear those same words from my wife every night. Honey, can you get me some water? And the me dial's like, no, that's so inconvenient for me. I just walked up the stairs. I'm tired too. But sometimes the most Jesus thing I can do is to serve without grumbling. More God and less me. You know, turning up the God dial allows me to be the best father, the best spouse that I can be. You know, and it's not just at home, it's at work as well. For me as an employee, for you, you know, it's really hit home for me. A couple of weeks ago, Sammer asked me, hey, Chris, would you want to preach on Sunday morning, you know, speak? And as soon as he asked, the anxiety starts settling in because you are a terrifying group of people. You should see yourselves, right? I mean, it's crazy, yeah. But when he asked me, I start to think, ooh, that'd be cool for me. That'd be cool for me. So the me dial starts to turn up. Because as I preach this message, I'm thinking, oh man, I hope people think really well of me. You know, me dial starts turning. I hope when you walk out of here, you say something under your breath like, oh man, Chris is a really good speaker. And that me dial starts to turn. And so for the past couple weeks, I've been studying, I've been researching about John the Baptist. I've been working with our service programming team, developing these slides. And every time the me dial, because I want you to think really well of me. And for you, it may be similar. You know, you get presented an opportunity at work, maybe a bonus, some recognition, achievement, to build your brand. Right? But for me, like this week, I'm working so hard, you know, trying to make this a really great message and all that. Then I start to ask myself, or really, I think it's God's Spirit that sort of starts nudging me. So say, Chris, can you pray this prayer this week? Can you say this thing? He must increase and I must decrease. Can I say, God, you got to become greater and I become less? And so even as I come out on stage this morning, I've been trying to pray, God, as much as I want these people to think well of me, Jesus, I pray they walk away thinking more of you. He must increase and I must decrease. This is personal for me. What does this look like for you? What does this look like for you this week? You've been so focused on the me dial, trying to get your stuff good and so focused here. What does it look like to turn up the God dial? More God, less me. More God, less me. Because when we do that, when there's more God in our lives and less, there's something beautiful that starts to happen. And that's something I want for you. I want it for all of us. I want it for me. I want the sound of our lives to become something beautiful. I want the sound of our lives to have healthier relationships, to have a growing faith for us, for our lives to be more joy-giving, love-driven, peace-filled. How? More God, less me. And let me wrap this up here. You know what's incredible is that John the Baptist, he could have gone through life trying to be all that he could be, trying to be the best baptizer he could be, set records for how many baptisms that he's done. You know, and him and his team, they could have spun their wheels, promoted their ministry, trying to be the best that they could be. I mean, that's what everyone around him wanted him to do. John, you do you, focus on you. Let's get this thing going. Let's turn up the me. But he discovered that the secret to reaching his fullest potential was to let Jesus be all that he could be. And what he discovered was that when he turns up the God dial and turns down the me dial, when he lets Jesus becomes big in his life, allowing Jesus to become the focal point in his life, he doesn't just become all that he can be. He actually becomes more than he can be, blowing past through all of his expectations of what life could look like. He becomes more than he could ever have been on his own. And you know how I know this? The Bible actually tells us about it. It's interesting because after John chapter 3, the Bible just goes on and on about Jesus, and John sort of falls into the shadow. You don't hear much about him. And so you might be wondering, did John ever make a name for himself? Is he forgotten? Did he blow his chance to reach his potential? And then you read this verse from Matthew. I tell you the truth, of all who have ever lived, none is greater than John the Baptist. And this is from Jesus himself. None is greater than John the Baptist. Can you imagine hearing that? John, you are the GOAT, you know? Samber, you're the GOAT. Chris, you're the GOAT. Can you imagine getting that kind of, hearing that from Jesus himself? That is some serious fulfillment. That is someone reaching their fullest potential, becoming the best version of themselves. And what was his secret? What was John's secret? What settings did he have? More God, less me. He recognized that on your own, we can strive to become all that we can be. But when we turn up the God dial, the Jesus dial in our lives, we have the capacity to become more than you could ever be. So, we go back to this. He must increase, and I must decrease. He must become greater, and I must become less. He must become greater, I must become less. Folks, whether you've prayed all your life or if you've never prayed before, let me teach all of us a very simple prayer today that we can carry with us this week. In fact, I'm going to ask you to repeat after me. It's a very, very simple prayer. It says this: Dear God, more you, less me. 6 simple words that I hope changes your life for the better this week. Let's pray together. God, we hear every message around us that tells us we need to be more. We hear every message around us that tells us we need to be greater or increase. But today we hear a message from you, Lord, saying that for us to achieve all that we can be, we can find that in you. So God, our prayer this week is to say, more you, less me. At home, at work, at school, wherever we find ourselves, dear God, more you, less me. In Jesus' name, amen.